If you receive Social Security, even a single missed or delayed deposit can throw everything off. Rent, groceries, medications, your sense of control. And over the last few weeks, something quiet has started happening inside banks. Not at Social Security, not at the SSA itself, but at the banks that actually handle your money. On the surface, it sounds technical. A routine rule update, the kind of thing most people scroll past. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. These bank rule changes may affect how Social Security deposits are processed, verified, and released. Not for everyone, not all at once, but enough that people are already noticing small disruptions and asking the same question. Why did my payment take longer this month? Now, before you jump to conclusions, listen closely. This is not a cut. This is not Social Security running out of money. And this is not some sudden cancellation of benefits. But it is a change. And when changes involve banks, automated systems, and government deposits, the effects don't always show up where you expect them to. A lot of viewers have been reaching out. Some confused, some worried, some frustrated. They're saying things like, my deposit came later than usual. My bank asked me to verify information I've had on file for years. I got a notice I didn't fully understand. And that's why we need to slow this down and talk it through properly. Because what's happening isn't loud, it's quiet. And quiet changes are often the ones that catch people off guard. Right now, banks across the country are adjusting how they review incoming government payments. That includes Social Security, SSI, SSDI, and survivor benefits. Why now? That's the part most headlines are skipping. Over the past year, banks have been under pressure to tighten fraud detection, identity verification, and payment tracking. Not just for credit cards, not just for wire transfers, but for direct deposits too, especially government-issued deposits. And when those rules change, the first thing that feels it isn't Wall Street. It's regular people, people like you. What usually happens in situations like this is subtle. A deposit that normally hits at midnight shows up the next morning. An account that's been quiet for months suddenly gets flagged for review. A name mismatch that never mattered before suddenly matters a lot. None of that means your benefits are gone, but it can mean delays, questions, and stress you didn't plan for. And here's the truth most people don't realize. Social Security sends the money, but once it reaches the banking system, banks control how fast it gets released into your account. That's where these rule changes live. Now, some banks are handling this smoothly, others are still adjusting, and that's why experiences aren't the same everywhere. You might be watching this thinking, my payment came on time, nothing changed. That's good, and it may stay that way, but others are noticing small shifts. And when you're on a fixed income, even a small shift feels big. This is also where rumors start. People hear bank rule changes and immediately assume the worst, that Social Security is being cut, that benefits are being frozen, that something is being taken away. That's not what's happening, but there is something new to understand, because when systems update, there's always a transition period, and during that period, confusion spreads faster than facts. What I want you to have right now is clarity, not panic, not speculation, just a clear picture of what's changing, what's not, and why it matters to you personally. In the next part, we're going to break down exactly what these bank rule changes are, what banks are now checking that they didn't before, and why Social Security deposits are part of that process. Some of it will sound boring at first, but stay with me, because once you understand how this works, it completely changes how you think about a late or unusual deposit, and what happens next may surprise you. Now let's talk about what actually changed, because this is where a lot of confusion comes from. On the surface, banks are calling these updates routine compliance adjustments. That sounds harmless, almost boring, but in practice, these changes affect how banks review and release incoming deposits. especially deposits coming from the federal government, including Social Security. Over the past year, banks have been dealing with a sharp rise in fraud tied to government payments, stolen identities, hijacked accounts, redirected deposits, and regulators noticed, so banks were told to tighten things up, not just on withdrawals or transfers, but on deposits too. Here's what that means in plain language. Banks are now running extra checks on certain direct deposits before they fully clear into your account. These checks don't happen every time. They're triggered by specific signals. Things like accounts that haven't had recent activity, minor name or address mismatches, changes in banking behavior, older accounts that haven't been reviewed in years. And yes, government deposits are included in that review process. That's the part many people don't realize. Social Security sends your payment on schedule, on time, in full. But once that payment hits the banking network, automated systems take over, and those systems don't know you personally. They follow rules, new rules. Some banks have updated how long they hold deposits while these checks run. Others now request verification where they didn't before. That's why someone who's had the same account for 10 or 20 years might suddenly get a notice, or a brief delay, or a request that feels unnecessary. From the bank's perspective, it's about fraud prevention. From your perspective, it feels like something changed overnight. And that's fair. Now here's what is not happening. Social Security is not changing payment dates. Benefits are not being reduced. There is no new income test tied to these bank updates. And there is no policy allowing banks to take your benefits away. That's important to say clearly. What is changing is the way banks confirm that deposits land in the right place, under the right name, into an active account. In most cases, these reviews are quick, sometimes invisible, but when they're not, people notice. A deposit that usually shows up late Tuesday night arrives Wednesday morning instead. A payment appears as pending longer than usual. A letter or email asks you to confirm information you haven't touched in years. And when that happens, it doesn't feel routine at all. It feels personal. Now, some banks rolled these changes out months ago. Others are still adjusting right now. That's why experiences are mixed. Two people receiving the same Social Security benefit can have completely different outcomes depending on their bank. This is also why calling the SSA doesn't always give you answers, because from Social Security's side, everything went out correctly. The delay, if there is one, happens after that, and this is where people get stuck between two systems. Social Security says the payment was sent. The bank says it's still processing. That gap is where stress lives, especially if you rely on that money for fixed expenses that don't wait. Rent doesn't wait, utilities don't wait, prescription refills don't wait. So even a short delay feels heavier than it sounds. Now, before you get too worried, there's something else you should understand. These rule changes aren't permanent disruptions, they're transition periods. What usually happens is that banks tighten systems, identify patterns, and then things smooth out again. But during that transition, a small number of people experience bumps, not because they did anything wrong, but because automated systems are learning. And those systems don't explain themselves very well. That's why this feels confusing right now. If you receive Social Security through direct deposit, most months will still look exactly the same. Your payment arrives, your bills get paid, nothing feels different. But for some people, small changes are starting to show up. And the key word here is small. This isn't about losing benefits, it's about timing, access, and temporary friction. Here's the first situation people are reporting. A deposit that normally hits late at night shows up the next morning instead. Same amount, same date on paper, but a few hours later than usual. That can matter if your account runs tight, or if bills are scheduled to pull automatically. Another situation involves accounts that haven't had many changes in years. If your bank account has been quiet, unchanged and untouched for a long time, it may now get a routine review. That review can briefly hold a deposit while the bank confirms everything matches. Name spelling, address formatting, account status. Things that never mattered before suddenly get checked. For example, a middle initial on your social security record that doesn't appear on your bank account, a shortened first name versus a full legal name, an address that hasn't been updated since you opened the account. None of these mean there's a problem with your benefits, but they can trigger a pause. Another group noticing changes includes people who recently changed something, a new bank, a new account number, a change after a spouse passed away, a switch from paper checks to direct deposit. Any recent adjustment makes automated systems look a little closer. Again, not because something is wrong, but because rules are tighter than they used to be. Some people have also received verification letters or messages, not from Social Security, from their bank. The wording can be confusing. It might mention account review or deposit verification, and if you're not expecting it, that alone can raise anxiety, especially when the letter arrives close to your payment date. Here's what usually happens next. The bank completes the check, the deposit clears, the account returns to normal. Most delays, when they happen, are short, a day, sometimes two. But when you live on a fixed income, that window feels much longer. And that's why this matters. Now, let's talk about who is least likely to notice anything. If you've had consistent deposits, steady account activity, and no recent changes, chances are your payments will continue as usual. Many viewers will never see a difference, but the reason we're talking about this is because for the ones who do notice something, it can feel alarming if no one explains it. A late deposit leads to questions. Questions turn into rumors. Rumors turn into fear, and fear spreads fast. Here's something important to keep in mind. If your payment doesn't show up exactly when expected, the most common outcome is not loss, it's processing. Social Security payments don't just disappear. They're tracked, logged, confirmed. What changes is how quickly banks release them during this adjustment period. And once an account clears a review, it typically doesn't get flagged again. That's why many people experience a one-time delay and then nothing else. Still, when you're the one waiting, that logic doesn't always help in the moment. Now let's slow everything down, because this is the part that puts things back into perspective. When banks roll out changes like this, there's always a period where systems adjust, staff learns new procedures, and automated reviews get refined. That period never lasts forever. What usually happens is simple. Banks identify what actually needs attention. False flags drop off. Deposits start moving smoothly again. Social Security payments, in particular, are among the most closely monitored deposits in the entire financial system. They're predictable, they're scheduled, they're verified at multiple levels. That doesn't mean delays can't happen, but it does mean there's a strong safety net built in. If a deposit is briefly held, it's tracked. If there's a question, there's a record. And when reviews are completed, payments resume normally. This is why most people who experience a delay only experience it once. After that, their account is essentially cleared under the new rules. And here's something else worth remembering. A delay is not a denial. A verification is not an investigation. And a bank notice is not an accusation. It's paperwork catching up to technology. Now, there's been a lot of noise online about what this means long term. Some headlines suggest this is the start of something bigger. Others imply Social Security itself is changing how it pays people. That's not what's happening. Social Security hasn't changed how it sends payments. The schedule remains the same. The amounts remain the same. The protections remain in place. What changed is the middle layer, the banking layer. And once that layer stabilizes, things usually feel normal again. This changes how you think about a late or unusual deposit. Instead of assuming the worst, you understand the process. Instead of panic, you have context. That alone makes a difference. The most important thing right now isn't to worry, it's to stay informed and steady. Understand what's changing, recognize what's not, and remember that these systems are designed to protect your money, even when the process feels inconvenient. If you found this explanation helpful, take a moment to stay connected. Subscribe so you don't miss future updates. Stay informed so small changes don't turn into big worries. Because your benefits matter, your peace of mind matters, and clarity is always better than fear. Thank you for spending this time with me.